Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Cut and Splice. This is Matt speaking, and as usual, I'm here with.
This is Gil.
And this is Jason.
And this time around, we're going to discuss something that's probably going to be somewhat controversial, which is filmmakers undeniably created, who have undeniably created brilliant works of cinema throughout their careers who seem to have teetered off uh, over the last decade or so, and why that may have been. Be kind. We're going to obviously be as uh, as kind as possible, dealing with a obviously brutal
Brutal.
subject. But
I think they'll take it with humor. I mean, it's not as if it's
yeah.
just that sometimes people make a bad movie and sometimes they
These
can't
people
make a
used
good
to
one
be
again.
good. Now they suck. No.
Yeah, it's not gonna be that
Right.
like rough.
Yeah,
It's just we're
right.
saying that there's something there to
Yeah,
discuss.
I mean, every time you make art, it's something that expresses something that's inside you, and when you spend 20 years making stuff that isn't good, it's personal. Like, there's no way around
I
that.
mean, what was the initial? I think was there a specific person that you made you think of this? Because I think you did when you brought it up to me.
There were a handful, and the sad thing is that I think the first person that came to mind for me was Michael Mann, and
Yes.
Michael Mann made one of my favorite movies of all time, which we've already talked about, which is Heat. I mean, he made Collateral, Last of the Mohicans, The Insider. He was a brilliant filmmaker, and I mean, when you look at his filmography as a director, 24 credits, and I mean, obviously, he had certain movies like LA Takedown, which, was a TV movie. We already covered Manhunter, uh, which I mean, it was a really low budget film, but fairly well made. Before that, he actually made Thief, which I think is kind of underrated and overlooked. I mean, it's not a great movie, but again, ultra low budget. And then Last of the Mohicans, which I mean, you got Daniel Day-Lewis. It's brilliantly shot. The score is beautiful. The scenery is beautiful. It's meticulously made. It's I mean, mostly historically accurate. Amazingly, uh, it's better than the book that it was based off of. Great movie. Follows that up with Heat, which I regard as the greatest, easily cops and robbers movie ever made. I think that it's easily among the top 5 crime movies in general ever made. You've got The Insider, which is unique. It's again Dante Spinati. You got talents like Al Pacino and Russell Crowe in his prime, uh, telling a deeply influential and important real story. Then you've got Ali, which we can kind of overlook, which wasn't very good.
That's pretty good. That's all right.
Yeah, and I mean, it was Emmanuel Lubezki, which, but again, meticulously made, very deliberate, very spot on. Collateral, which is honestly my second favorite Michael Mann movie,
Yeah,
uh,
I agree. I mean,
with Tom Cruise giving one of the best performances of his career, Jamie Foxx giving one of the best performances of his career. It was innovative. It was visceral. It was it was just a really well made movie. And then he went full digital, and he hasn't made a good movie since then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miami Vice, not good. Public Enemies, not good. Black Hat, who the hell saw it?
I saw it. It was not good.
Well, that's
I,
bad. Now we know.
yeah, Collateral was the last movie that I shot on film, and then that I shot at all on film. Collateral did use digital cameras, but it was shot mixture film and digital. Miami Vice was the movie that he decided to shoot full digital. He's gone full digital since then, and since then he hasn't made a good movie.
Yeah, but I mean that's we brought that up in one of our
Yeah,
episodes, so we don't have to thread on that too much. But
yeah.
I think the point was taken. It seems like, and I do like Ali less, and I'm actually not a big fan of The Last of the Mohicans. I think that he's just an uneven
Blasphemy.
director for me.
Blasphemy.
I know. Someday we'll do an episode about it. But yes, he definitely has a trend there. And it's something in popular culture. It's known that Tarantino has the whole 10 movie thing, and he wants to retire for the same reason that we're discussing, because he has this.
Wants to avoid what we're discussing.
He wants to avoid the dipping down. And recently Bill Maher interviewed him and said, like, what are you talking about? Like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is like one of your best movies, and like I think you're just getting like to like a new phase in your career where you're making these different and interesting movies. And I kind of take that point. I think it's a good point. I think that's what some directors do. They do evolve over time. And yes, much like, say, Scorsese, if you're going to make that many movies, you're going to be hit and miss. There's no doubt. But you're still going to have hits. So I feel like the Scorsese approach makes sense to me. I think he's made a bit too many movies. I would have done it at a slower pace, not as slow as Kubrick, but maybe every 3 to 5 years making a movie. It seems reasonable. But yeah, it's undeniable that this trend exists. And I brought up at some point, it's comedy is that way too. Like you look at Jim Carrey, and like there's a thing about comedy where at some point you realize you're not as funny as you were in the beginning of your career, where you had the most creative energy, you were the most ambitious. You're just not as hungry anymore. And I wonder if some of that is what happens to directors. You need to be really, really hungry to, like someone like Michael Mann, he puts so much effort into his stuff that I wonder if it's, as you get older, you just can't have that same level of energy, and maybe the work suffers. That would be one theory.
I believe at one point in time you said you had a theory that maybe I don't know, I don't remember how you put it, but I interpreted what you said as kind of like phases of life, like they go from being that hungry 20 something 30 something out of film school or whatever, and they've got 4 or 5 exciting movies under their belt and they're like on fire, and then suddenly they like get married and have kids or something like that, and suddenly your life is changing inevitably. And some people that like instills new thoughts and new creative energies, and other people it just kind of pulls and sucks the energy, the creative energy out of you, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, and we mentioned there's the Shyamalans or the Jason Reitman with comedy that have like 2, 3 really good movies in the beginning and then starting to dip altogether, which is almost like a, not a one-hit wonder, but like a 2 to 3 hit wonder, where they just can't get the same level that they showcased in the beginning. So there's different levels of this, and some people can sustain it for longer, and some people just kind of drop out. Even Kubrick, which I don't think he really dropped out, but there's a sense stuff was just too spaced out with him. But it does feel like between Full Metal Jacket, which was an intense movie and was very thought through, but between Full Metal Jacket and then Eyes Wide Shut, as apart as they are with the years, that it was a slight dip, because he was like he was doing what? Like he started from Lolita's was really when he gained steam, like Paths of Glory, Lolita. Then he did like Doctor Strangelove, then 2001 where he peaked, and then he does Clockwork Orange, which is still at the peak. Like it's a different kind of movie than 2001, but very much in its peak. And then he does The Shining, which is also peak. They're all like different peaks of different genres with different movies, but that's like a 3-movie peak that I don't think any director's ever had. But then after The Shining, it does feel like Full Metal Jacket. It's not. It is one of the best war movies ever made, but it's but it's not in the same way that The Shining is one of the top 5 horror movies ever made, or the 2001 being the best sci-fi movie ever made, and Doctor Strangelove being the best satire movie ever made. So there's definitely a dip there, and then I really feel like what would you consider like Eyes Wide Shut? It's not even the best movie about sex ever made. It's pretty damn good. It's not bad, but there's even Kubrick was like not immune to it. And we can mention other ones, but it'll take us too long to go through like filmographies of each of them. But one thing I want to throw out there as a counter theory is you look at someone like Spielberg. He's a bit immune to that, even though he's getting old. It's not that he doesn't miss, but he doesn't miss by a lot. And I think that's a factor of him being more of a technician than a
Yeah.
writer director. Like it's the fact that he just have to direct and not so much come up with the stories and research them and evolve them and is not as personally involved in the putting together of the idea as much as those other directors are. And I think that's why he's kind of special. I think Fincher is also in that level. Like he's just such a good technician that I can see him just keep making really good movies. Scorsese is like that too. He's just not as much of a technician as he is, more of a writer director type of like very personal movies. Some of them. So yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Spielberg is an odd like animal there, which I guess is to his credit.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that is fair to kind of bring up about Michael Mann, which I think is relevant, is that so much of what makes a movie like Heat so iconic is the fact that this guy did his fucking work in terms of like literally understanding how every aspect of the bank heist business and the counter the police following these people actually works. He really got into all of that. And then you look at something like Black Hat, and I mean, you've got somebody who's like what he was born in 1943, and he's trying to get into cyber terrorism.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a whole new world for him to have to deal with in order to try to actually deal with it competently in the way that he's used to dealing with things. Still, that doesn't excuse Public Enemy, which was just not good. And also not good from a technical standpoint. And but actually, that's a good transition to like Robert Zemeckis,
I was going to
who
bring it too.
seems to have fallen off pretty steeply over the last several years. And like with Back to the Future, I mean, he does have writing credits on Back to the Future and everything, but I mean, I think that his last movie that really stuck out to me as even having a really good sequence in it was Flight. I mean the that plane crash sequence was one of the greatest sequences that I've ever seen put on screen,
But
and the rest of the movie kind of felt like a big budget student film.
yeah,
Well, student movie. It was shot digitally, but yeah,
yeah, his movies definitely took a hit as soon as he started doing all the mocap stuff.
yeah,
I will admit that I didn't um especially after being so let down by the Beowulf one, I didn't bother watching the Christmas Carol one that he did with Jim Carrey, just because the marketing was horrendously bad for it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why the trailer focused on this one aspect of one special effect that was just, it's not important getting into it, just it was awful. But then years later, like many years later, like probably 5-10 years after it came out or something like that, I remember my brother recommended I watch it one year around Christmas time, and I was like, okay. After watching it, I was like, this is actually really good. It has an amazing cast of voice actors, but it's just, even that movie, which was decent, suffered horribly from like the whole we're intentionally making every scene in this thing to be 3D.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so completely obvious that they wanted, you know what I'm talking about, when you watch a movie like that where there's just way too much stuff that's flying out of the screen at you or something like that. And it's just gets to the point where it's aggravating. But yeah, even I think just after that one, I think was Flight or something like that. But yeah, it just, his movies have really dropped off, unfortunately, because he had such a stellar beginning to his career.
Yeah, I think Orson Welles once said that the enemy of creativity is a lack of restraint, or something like that. You know that
Yeah.
and I feel like the latter portion of Zemeckis's career has kind of been illustrative of that, where he's kind of just seen, wow, there's nothing that I can't do, so let's do it all.
Yeah.
And kind of losing sight of the actual core of what makes a good movie. But
I wonder if could that be a theory that maybe it's because these people are have done so many movies at a certain point that they keep trying to either they're just falling back to the same old tricks and they're just stale and outdated, or that they're trying too many new things because they're looking for new ways to make a movie, and just the ideas don't always work out, because the more you try something, the more chances you have to fail, more than anything. But it does feel like it's a with some of these, it's just like a pretty consistent dip. Like, it's not as if like, oh wow, that's an amazing movie, like out of 5. Like Scorsese does that, but again, I feel like he's one animal, and then Spielberg is one animal. Like there's something there. Like, but most people, it is true that they pretty much dip and never have a surprise hit. All of a sudden in their like 70s, they'll make like a classic. That doesn't
Yeah.
seem to happen very often.
Agreed.
I mean, I think it varies. With Zemeckis, I see it as being more of an obsession with technology, and like, oh shit, this is something that I could have done in with Back to the Future back in the 80s that I couldn't do then and I could do now. Okay, I'll gloss over the script. Script is fine. It lets me do this cool new thing. It lets me play with this new toy or something. With Michael Mann, honestly, and I can actually cite this. Oh, actually, this is more Dante Spinotti than Michael Mann, but the fact that Michael Mann would even allow it to happen, like on Public Enemy, they shot it digitally, and there was a sequence that was like this mini car chase sequence set at night in this like wooden area and everything. And they had scouted the location several months before they actually went out to shoot. And when they went out to shoot, the trees had actually grown a lot more dense, so they couldn't punch enough light through. And Dante Spinotti actually said in the American Cinematographer article, oh, so we just turned off the shutter in the camera. And that's a brilliant thing that we can do with digital cameras that we can't do with film cameras. And that
Yeah.
sequence looked like junk.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just think that there comes a moment where you get enamored with the technology, either in the Robert Zemeckis way of, wow, this is something that really could have been cool if I could have done this in 1985. So let's do it now and just like craft an entire movie around me being able to do this one cool thing technologically. And then there's the Michael Mann response to the technology, which is, well, if I shot this back in 1995, we actually would have had to light this. Suddenly, we don't have to light this, so why not why not just not light this and go for it? And it's kind of like just imagine in carpentry if that rule of measure twice, cut once suddenly became irrelevant, and you can just cut. You feel like you can just keep cutting, and it's never going to cost you anything. Eventually, it's going to hurt the end product.
Well,
Yeah.
you brought up that thing about the shutter. We discussed it one time, and
Yeah,
maybe it's good to bring it up again. And
yeah,
maybe it is the symptom, because we're saying that there is a form of laziness, or at least not as much ambitious about it. And that's just like a almost that little thing, even though the technologies doesn't seem like the right thing, but it's a hint that beyond that same approach to the shutter, or to the cinematic tricks of Zemeckis or whatever gimmicks, it's just a symptom that the whole thing is just lazier. Like, because it's lazier, because it's not as focused, is why the end result is not as effective. Maybe it's hard to say, but I don't know. I'm looking at like Bergman's like filmography, and I know he too, like, he towards the end, like he did that mini series, the Fanny and Alexander, like in the 80s. And I remember like not liking that one very much, but it is very extravagant and very detailed and very this and very that, but not very focused. Like, that's the thing. Like, it's hard to like pinpoint exactly what it is that creates this dip. Even Kurosawa had like Ran was late in his career, right? And Dreams.
yeah.
Those are like two Kurosawa movies that were towards the end, and they're both very extravagant, very detailed. A lot is going into them, but they're not. But they're not the same. It's not Rashomon. It's not Seven Samurai. It's not Ikiru. It's just not. And it's whether those earlier movies were just a stroke of genius, and but it just doesn't explain why he can't have a stroke of genius towards the end. I mean, somebody could come to him. It's kind of like Spielberg. Like, somebody can come to you. You're the best director in the world. They're going to come to you with brilliant ideas. All you have to do is execute it. But for some
Yeah.
reason, it's like,
Well,
now I feel like we need to find that movie that somebody made in their 70s that was a complete classic. Like, I'm trying to think of one, of a
I wish
director.
I had thought, yeah, we had thought about this before. We could have researched. I'm sure there's got to be one.
Maybe
yeah,
somebody will tell us, but like, but the fact that, but this is the thing about this show. If it doesn't jump to our heads, then
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
then there's a reason for that, because it's not very common that
yeah.
it happens.
but I mean, so much of the brilliance about Spielberg, on top of what you already mentioned, Gil, is that his films seem to age with him pretty well. I mean, with the exception of like the BFG, I thought that was a little bit too.
Tonal problems.
Yeah. Also, incidentally, that's the one movie that Spielberg shot digitally.
Ah,
But uh, and I mean, it had its high points, but it felt too young for him. I think, and but I mean, just over the last 20 years, we've seen him go from Minority Report being a movie that we think, oh, Spielberg. That makes sense to Bridge of Spies and Lincoln and stuff like that. Okay, that makes sense. That's Spielberg now because he's older. He's not making these hyperactive sci-fi action movies anymore.
Well, he made Ready Player One, and that was awesome.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point.
I still think you're making a good point.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the that I don't think it's that he can't relate to certain styles or ages. I think he just tried something and it just didn't work. I do think that Spielberg is not that far removed from Scorsese in the sense that they've both made a lot of movies. Considering like they were pretty prolific, and you're always going to have a an element there of like a hit and miss when you make that many movies more than anything. It just seems like that Spielberg is slightly more consistent than Scorsese because he's
I
a
would
better
definitely agree with
technician.
that.
Scorsese is a better storyteller, but
Is he though?
he is. But Spielberg is a better technician. He's just a better. He can move the camera better. He can build a scene well, but Spielberg doesn't have a Raging Bull. He doesn't have a Taxi Driver. He doesn't have he doesn't have a Goodfellas. Like he doesn't have movies that are so deeply personal, and just dig so deep. Like he's tried. I mean, Schindler's List, meh. It's a good movie.
I think Schindler's List and Jurassic Park are better than everything you just said.
Disagree. I'm very sorry.
Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan is not that good of a movie. It's an okay movie. It's not even like a top 10 war movie for me, I think. I'm not that crazy. The first 30 minutes of it is amazingly done because he's Spielberg. But the rest of the movie is kind of meh. If nothing else, that's the main problem with that movie. That's why I think we should do a double episode with Full Metal Jacket because they both have this issue of like, it's like two movies in one,
Yeah.
in a way.
That would be good.
It's a very uneven movie. I mean, it's not like that the rest of after the first 30 minutes is not good. It's just that it's not great. Is it Apocalypse Now good? No, it isn't. It's not even. Sadly I have to say, like it's not even it's not even Platoon good.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Saving Private Ryan is a good war movie. It's not a great war movie.
Wow.
It just isn't. I actually think that if anything, like I think one of his highlights, like my two favorite movies of Spielberg is Minority Report and Jaws. I think Jaws is the closest thing he got to a perfect movie, and it's not Raging Bull, it's not Taxi Driver, but it is an important movie in the sense that he really took the craft of filmmaking to a new level. Like the Jaws is a direct descendant of what Hitchcock did with movies. He just really like being a technician and just understanding that you have this power in your hands to really manipulate the image and take the audience for a ride. And that's amazing. But I think he's spent his entire career trying to duplicate it, but it's never quite as good as Jaws. He's very, very good. He's very, very close. But Jaws is the purest that he ever was. I think because he was young and he was that energetic. So even Spielberg lost something. It's just that he didn't. He dropped from like 99% to like 85, 90, where I feel like a lot of directors drop to like the 60s or something as far as like
or less
pure creative energy that they have.
Well, any discussion about like war movies and Saving Private Ryan is going to have to be kicked down the road because holy shit, do I have some stuff to say to you?
Yeah, of course. No, we don't want to get bogged down on specific things.
I'll have to like rewatch Raging Bull, which I have on DVD because like I mean I think Jaws is a better movie than Raging Bull.
Yeah, I won't deny that, but I do think Taxi Driver is better than Jaws. Taxi Driver is a top 10 movie for me. I think
I did really like Taxi Driver. I should watch that again too.
Those are also like comparing apples and garlic or something.
That's true.
But,
yeah, no, I understand, but what I'm saying is like,
but we have to at least be able to
Scorsese.
say objectively which.
But
one
the
we
point
think
is,
better.
you know what's a good comparison is a good modern comparison is Paul Thomas Anderson to Tarantino. Paul Thomas Anderson makes beautiful, amazing drama that is just art pieces to put in a museum. Tarantino makes violent revenge movies. He's a great technician. His movies look great. There might be some substance there as well. Like, it's not purely just entertainment. But you compare him to his same generation, like they came at the same time, Paul Thomas Anderson, and I can't even begin to compare, you know, like There Will Be Blood to something like, say, Pulp Fiction. They're both amazing movies, but Pulp Fiction is just a crazy joyride, where There Will Be Blood is a profound movie about the nature of ambition and, capitalism and, like, it's just such a profound movie. Like, whereas, like, oh yeah, he like messed around with like they started where they began and they ended where they started. Okay, that's kind of cool and it's really awesome and it's enjoyable moment to moment. But I can't compare those two movies. So that's the way I feel like Spielberg and Scorsese is. Scorsese makes these deeply personal, dramatic movies, and Spielberg is just making a joyride, which is why even Saving Private Ryan and even Schindler's List, he did them well, especially Schindler's List. Like, he took a step back. He tried to be more pure there, but he's always going to be Spielberg. Like, there's I think it might have been like Michael what's his name, Hanukkah, the one who did Funny Games.
Yeah.
I think he said that he really hated Schindler's List because even though it was black and white and he was trying to make it horrific and everything, it's way too glorified because it's Spielberg. He just can't take a notch down. Like, it's just, he does what he does, and it's just too good. Like, that's why I prefer a movie like The Pianist. Like, I think it's a better movie about the Holocaust.
On that point, I don't know if Michael Haneke said it, but I know that Laszlo Nemes, the director of Son of Saul, said something similar to about Schindler's List. And
Yeah, it's a bit too
uh,
polished. It's too polished. It's actually, Spielberg has said that it was the first movie he used handheld camera because he was trying to like get out of his comfort zone, and he didn't do a bad job. He didn't do well enough. Like, I don't think that movie, even though it was a success and everything, I don't think it's the best Holocaust movie ever made. Not that it should even be a thing, but but um but yeah, I can't explain it. It's a good thing that we got on the subject, because this has been bugging me for a while, that I feel like Spielberg he's probably the best director of all time as far as being a technician. Him and Hitchcock, and I would put Fincher in that category.
The three of them are very, very good. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Fincher, I don't know why he's kind of like gone to do all these like B movie story like lately. He's making them really well, but they're not gonna stand the test of time. I feel like most of his movies, unfortunately. But that's his shtick. That it's his right to do that. But yeah,
Well,
that's kind of what
to
Hitchcock used to do. He made a lot of like weird like murder mystery movies that, a lot of them didn't stand the test of time. But I guess if you make enough of them, he's got at least 5 that are like all-time greats.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there were a few movies that toward the end of Hitchcock's career, I think it was Topaz specifically, that Hitchcock actually just dismissed as being the worst decision that he ever made as a filmmaker. And he just openly said, like, yeah, that was a piece of shit movie. And I obviously in a more eloquent British
Yeah.
use of words, but yeah, I got too obsessed with it, with like the visual aspect of it, and I didn't actually tell a story, and so on and so forth.
I'll say
Yeah.
one
Well,
other thing before I forget is also because the past thing made me remember is David Lynch. Like, when he made Inland Empire, he borderline like apologized for it. Like, he said, "Oh, like I was just trying something really weird. I took this video camera and I thought I could make a movie with it, but I did make a movie with it. It's not amazing, but it's not bad." But he's kind of like dismissed his own movie as being sort of like, yeah, I could have done better, and he hasn't made a movie since because that same fear that, like, well, I got this legacy of movies. Why tarnish it with more bad movies?
I wish some people would think that way that don't.
Well, I guess that's what Tarantino says, but that's the question. I guess we can
No. I'm
try.
not talking about Tarantino.
No, but yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like that's a good place to wrap on. So like, what do you think? Do you think it's that the Tarantino approach is the correct one? That some people should do it once they have a dip, or like like leave on a high note, or that the Scorsese Spielberg way of just like having longevity, but maybe have more like a hit and miss, more so with Scorsese, is worthwhile.
I don't think there's any clear cut way to go about it. I think it depends. It's different for everybody. I mean, like, I don't understand how you can make a movie like Apocalypse Now and then basically not make any good movies for 30 years. The last 30 years, he hasn't made anything good.
I was gonna bring that up. I think he's in the Shyamalan, unfortunately, in the Shyamalan Jason Reitman category of like he's like a 2 to 3 hit wonder, and basically, yeah, he wasn't interested in making movies. I think generally,
maybe
not as much.
I don't know. I think I'm even very forgiving of his movies. Like I think that Peggy Sue Got Married and Bram Stoker's Dracula have a lot to offer, but
Yeah.
I mean that still puts us at 1992. You know,
Oh, but, and he also
1992.
made around that time he made the third Godfather, which was not great.
That was before Dracula, but yeah, also bad. But I mean, I'm still saying I'm being as generous as I can, you know, and that still puts us at 30 years. It's pretty terrible, you know. And then like, you're talking about like what's the right way to go about it. I mean, I don't. We're all looking at this with hindsight, so it's easy for us to say. But I mean, I wish at this point in time, I either wish that Tim Burton had just stopped making movies after Big Fish, or that nobody had ever introduced him to like CGI or something, because like I don't really think he's made a good movie since then either.
I mean, again, I don't think that this is a simple thing to deal with. I mean, just on the whole Francis Ford Coppola thing, maybe after you've made Godfather, Godfather 2, and Apocalypse Now, and you come to the point where, you know what? I think I'm going to spend a year of my life making Jack. Maybe it's time to hang up the cleats.
Maybe.
I mean, The Rainmaker, which was his next film after Jack, wasn't bad.
I never saw it.
It wasn't
heard
good.
about it.
I saw it, but it's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just one of those things where, think about it like, hey, if you're Colin Kaepernick, yeah, you went to the Super Bowl, you lost, okay. You kind of had a bad season after that, and you made a few bad decisions, and now you're trying to make it back as a backup quarterback in any team that'll take you. Maybe just, take the Nike money and call it quits.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, actually, that's one other area though. Like, can some of those people who were on the top, who were making, mega budget movies and doing really well, making classics, and that will survive the ages. Are there some of these people who can just take a couple hits in the mouth, realize, you know what, maybe I should stop making movies at, the $100 million, $150 million range for a while, go back to the kind of movies that got me to that area, make a movie for $1 million and really strip everything down and just see if I can still tell a story.
Yeah, no, I think Paul Thomas Anderson recently, when Licorice Pizza came out, he said how he's kind of happy about, like, he's got his own little sandbox where he gets to play with, like, in his own range of like budgets and expectations. Like he doesn't put a lot of pressure on himself because he was discussing the whole superhero movies versus dramas and like that whole feud. What is artistic? What is just like Scorsese said, like, amusement park rides and stuff. But ultimately, there's space for everything. And yes, there is a space for Tim Burton to keep making movies, or Tarantino for that matter, hopefully. Because even though I think he's not as good as Paul Thomas Anderson, he is amazing, and his movies are still worth watching. That yeah, seeing it as a sandbox, and yeah, if you strip things down, try something different. Don't keep trying to make better and better. Just like, well, let's take a step back, do something different, take it easy. Like it's kind of like you can relate it to music too. Like a lot of musicians late in their career, they can't really like you can't really like have the same thing that you had. But if you strip things down, do something a little differently, like David Bowie, like had like a record late in his career that had like some great songs in it. Bob Dylan too. I think my favorite Bob Dylan song is like was released in the 2000s. Go figure. So you just have to accept that at that point in your career, you're not gonna be as good as you used to be, but you're still the same person. You still have the same mind. So you're gonna have a hit, and I think it's worthwhile. But yeah, whether you scale it back, you scale it down, you space yourself more so you can make sure you choose
Perhaps
the right project.
maybe going back to your analogy of music, sometimes maybe if you just strayed a little bit too far from your comfort zone, maybe just taking a slight step back towards what you're used to.
It's sort of what Scorsese did with the Irishman. And even though it was an okay movie, it was not Goodfellas, obviously.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, so that's true, but at the same time, I wonder. I
I
wonder
was
if,
thinking of Guy Ritchie,
yeah,
because I love. I mean, we talked about him with one of our first episodes, but I mean, I love most of his movies. And then it seemed like after Man from Uncle, suddenly things started getting real questionable and real sketchy, you know. And there was like 5 years or so where it was starting to look really bad. And then again, like I said in that recording, I didn't see The Gentleman, but it looked pretty good. I still don't know anyone who's seen it. I hope it's a good movie. I want to check it out. And then we all talked about Wrath of Man, which was pretty good. And it looks like the movie that he has coming out this year is a very much Guy Ritchie type of movie, like a lot of the kind of an ensemble with a crazy story and stuff like that. And it looks really good. So I'm hoping that he's kind of stepped back into the right, at least into the lane that he's more comfortable in, and is cranking out some good movies again.
yeah, I hope so. That's I guess ultimately we do agree that these people have a fan base. So even though, and maybe like what Matt says about scaling back makes more sense, because let's face it, unless you're Spielberg and you can make a big budget movie that's going to make a lot of money, like maybe just scaling back, keeping it simple, and just letting your fans get to watch some more of your creative work is what it's all about. It's I think mostly it's just about acknowledging that you're not as ambitious as you used to be, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Like you don't have to there's room for all kinds of art. So
Yeah.
all kinds of movies in this case.
Motherfucker, Guy Ritchie is making Aladdin 2.
I just saw that. I didn't want to bring it up because it's not really what we're talking
Okay.
about, but I saw that and I was like, damn it, this is gonna suck.